Hello. Uh, last lecture we started the discussion on land for housing, how we can manage the land. We discussed about the various elements of land cover and land use, land value, its relation with the housing. So, today in continuation of that we will discuss specific methods for land management which is required for housing. So, for this purpose before we go to the next part, quickly recap the last lecture. We discussed about the inevitable urbanization which converts the land cover to the specific land use. Land uses are represented through different categories and colors. We discussed that starting from residential, commercial, industrial, public, semi-public, transportation, green, recreational, all gross residential, gross land use areas are represented with specific color code, and land value is influenced by the distance. Land value is very high in the center and low in the periphery, and land value has a direct relation with the connectivity and the city profile. And also we discussed the need for the scientific land management methods which is required for to create the good housing areas and residential areas. So, today for discussing this, the first thing we will discuss that what happens if we do not assemble or do not manage land. In a typical development, when we do not do any planning intervention, when we do not do any land management, what happens? The people come first, they purchase a land from the market or from the private land, they get a plot, then they make their house. After some time they find that there is no services, essential services. So, the municipal authority or the panchayat authority, they come and they provide the services, but the problem is because already the land and house is developed, they do not get much areas for the service, basic essential service like the accessibility, water supply, sanitation, waste management. So, this becomes unplanned housing. Whereas, in the planned housing, where we take care about the land and services well before the people come, that approach is different. Where we start with the land, we take the land as a subject, we segregate the land, we plan the land, we assign the land use, we develop the land, and based on that we develop the services or the infrastructure like say connectivity, water supply, drainage, sewerage, every essential service. Then that particular land is given to the people, and the people or we can make house, and then the people can come or house can be constructed, both can be possible. So, this is the planned housing, how we generate planned housing. So, fundamental difference between these two approaches, this first approach is the conventional, this is more common in India, and most of the building, most of the houses are privately owned single family housing or maximum multiple family housing, but in a single ownership plot, and it is done like that, and which is basically unplanned housing. Here in this case basically we do lot of retrofitting works by creating the infrastructure in an existing township, but here when we make the township or we make the new housing area, we do the land supply, land and service before the house and the people come. So, that is a basic fundamental difference, that is how we generate the planned housing. Now, let us see a conceptual plan of a city, how a city grows and how the land value, accessibility and the city form is interrelated. You can see the major transport network of a typical city. These are the major roads and these are the other roads. This boundary is the city municipal boundary. Now, please recall the discussion about the relation between the land value and the connectivity. Since this is the major transport network which is going from the city core to the other city or other areas, the land value will be very high in this area because the connectivity is very high. They are very much well connected with this area, not this area or that area. So, for that reason the city will grow like this, like in this fashion, which will follow the future road network. So, this will even if this is the municipal boundary, this will be the city growth based on the land value and the connectivity. So, here our planning intervention should cover all the areas including the future land value, future prospective area where the land value is very high, because you can see this area, this green area which is undeveloped even within the municipal limit, and this is even beyond the municipal limit or the city limit, it is developed area. You can see sometimes we call it as a outgrowth because it is grown beyond this municipal limit, but it is a urban area. So, this area, this light green area may be added to the municipal boundary as a planned intervention, whereas this green area, this yellow area development with municipal limit, these areas. Okay. Now, we come to that. So, considering all this land value dynamics with the connectivity and the land use, let us now see what are the categories of land supply management. There are broadly 4 categories of land supply management. The first part is called as acquisition. Acquisition is basically acquisition of land and property by the government authority. Sometimes it is called as expropriation, which is nothing but for any public purpose government can take any property, it may be land, it may be any building also for the public purpose, but in return government has to provide the adequate compensation. Other than this, government can take the large scale land as a input to the very big infrastructure development or industrial development. For example, when government wants to develop a new township or a industry or a big kind of infrastructure like say water treatment plant or solid waste management system. So, they take the large scale land from the people and they provide adequate compensation. In the second category, which is called land use and development control, last day when we last lecture we discussed about the legal framework and institutional framework. Under that we discussed that in state government they have Town and Country Planning Act, and Town and Country Planning Act basically assigns the land use and the development control. So, here they do not acquire the land, here in this approach they do not acquire the land, but they make a control, they make a prescription of land use and the control for the building. So, sometimes it is called master plan, sometimes it is called land use and development control plan, where they assign the specific land use and specific buildability, specific controls. So, sometimes it is called as transferable development right, in short TDR. TDR is nothing but a transferable development right over a piece of land. You can build floor areas. So, that floor areas is termed through FAR, floor area ratio, which is nothing but the overall floor area of all the floors built over that particular land divided by the total land. So, this floor area can be transferred from one land to another land. So, irrespective of this land use prescription, this particular TDR also can be used as a control mechanism. Then we come to another mode of land assembly, which is called plot reconstitution and land pooling. Here in this method, neither we are acquiring land or neither we are controlling the development, we are assigning the land use and development control, but we are taking the land, we are getting the land for some period of time, then we are making a planning exercise, we are subdividing the land in a way so that the land can be utilized for the better service facility and better planning, and then we are giving back the land to the original land owners with some few guidelines. So, here we are taking a combination of the advantage of the land acquisition, where we are not acquiring the land, but we are taking the land for some time, we are using the right of development by the government, right of taking land, right of using that land, giving the control of the land, and we are assigning the land use, assigning the minimal land use for that particular land. In partnership model, basically we are not doing any direct intervention here, but here government and private party, they are they work together as a partner. So, they basically can do for a guided land development or joint land development. Like the private party, they can acquire or they can purchase the land directly, government can provide some rules and regulation and some control, and based on that both of them jointly can develop that land. So, this particular model neither uses the acquisition or land use prescription or assembly, but it is a kind of a partnership development model. So, let us see what are the basic difference and the characteristics of this model. So, in the first category it is told as land acquisition. And then we got master plan or LUDCP. And in the next method we have seen, and the fourth method is partnership model. So, a basic land assembly has different stages. The first stage is making land available. The second stage is assigning land use. Then third stage is control over the built form. An approach. So, basically our parameters are making land available, how we are making the land available. Second is whether after making the land available, whether we are assigning land use, how we are assigning land use. Fourth is after assigning the land use, whether we are making any control over the built form or the building, then ownership is transferred or not, and then what is the overall approach. Now, in the first category, in the land acquisition, basically the land acquisition is done by the using the exclusive right of the government. We told that under the Land Acquisition Act, the government as eminent domain, they can use the concept of eminent domain, which is nothing but the right and authority or of acquiring any piece of land. So, using that eminent domain, which is nothing but the exclusive right, they acquire the land. So, here it is exclusively owned by they take the land, whereas in master plan and LUDCP they do not own. Here the land is owned by, so here in this case is written by original owner. So, the original owner may be government, it may be private, it can be company, but government is not taking the ownership of the land. In assembly, so government takes the land partly and original owner he keeps the land ownership of the remaining plot. Let me elaborate this part. Let suppose the land unit is 100 units. So, for developing that 100 units of land, maybe government needs say 30 units of land for providing infrastructure, service, connectivity. So, government can take that 100 units of land and provide the service and utility in 30 units, and remaining 70 units can be given back to owner. So, the advantage of the private owner is that they are getting 70 units from their original 100 units, but these 70 units are much more better in quality in terms of the service facility. So, in place of 100 units of raw land, undeveloped land, they are getting 70 units of developed land. That is the advantage. And for the government, the advantage is they are getting some amount of land for assigning the facilities and infrastructure, and also within this land they will keep some amount of land as a surplus land, so that they can generate some amount of recovery money or some amount of surplus money, so that they can build the infrastructure without taking the money from the government exchequer. So, that is the land assembly mechanism. In partnership model, the land is retained by the original owner. But in a partnership model, but it depends on the partnership basis. For example, if the land is owned by the government, they can share the ownership. If the land is owned by the any private company, that can be also shown by the shared by the government and the private party. Then assigning land use, here in the land acquisition method, here is it exclusively by the government. Basically, depending on that particular land use, government acquires the land. If it is industrial use, if it is a infrastructure or any kind of transport terminal or housing or new township, so for that government takes that land for the public purpose. So, here no amount of, no role of any private party or private company comes, exclusive right of the government comes. So, control over the build form, yes, and ownership of transfer, yes, the transfer of the ownership is fully there, because the private land is owned by the acquired by the government. So, here approach is the basically it's a using the eminent domain, and basically it is a top down approach. Top down means the government authority can take the land directly. Now, with the current revision of the Land Acquisition Act, where government is also taking consent and the consent from the original landowner, so it has become a top down and also some amount of bottom up approach for the land acquisition. So, but by and large they are using the eminent domain to acquire the land. Now, we come to the master plan and LUDCP. Yes, they are though they are not taking the land, here they are basically land is retained by the original landowner, but the land use prescription is there. So, yes, that is the major strength of this model, that they are prescribing land use. Even if they are not taking the land, but they can prescribe the land use for particular purpose. So, based on our dynamics of, we have seen this dynamics of the land value and connectivity, they can prescribe the land use even if they are not taking the land on their own ownership. So, based on this dynamics and overall analysis of the city, the prescription is given for the under this master plan LUDCP approach. And yes, here also they have the control over build form, they have specific control in terms of the FAR, ground coverage, everything, the building control is there, and ownership transfer, no. So, So, here no ownership transfer is required from the private to the government. Government is coming and facilitating the development work just by assigning the new land use, and here the approach is also top down, because in the planning process, in the master plan and the LUDCP process, by and large the land use prescribed by the government is not largely discussed with the people. Based on few feedbacks and few technical analysis, the land use prescription is given, and so land use prescription and build control, it ultimately these two things makes a city or makes a new housing areas. In the third element, which is called as land assembly, where we have seen that the ownership is shared in a mutual basis, there also the land use prescription is done, but partly, if required, partly. Mostly the land use prescription government retains with them, and here the land which is returned to the original owner, sometimes they have any land use prescription, and sometimes it is given to them without any embargo, without any prescription or without any control, so that they can get the full benefit of the land. But definitely some guidelines like say percentage of residential, percentage of commercial, that is given. Definitely some incompatible or very hazardous land use cannot be there, those kind of broad guidelines is given, but it is not very stringent. So, the land use prescription is partly not very stringent like the land use and development control plan. Here also they have the development control, definitely they provide all the development controls as was there in the land use and development control plan, and ownership is transferred partly. As we have seen that this for the 70%, we took example, it could be 60% also or 65% or 50%. So, some amount of land which government is giving back to the original owner with the enhanced facility and infrastructure, which is we call developed land. So, for those land the ownership is not transferred, but for the remaining land where government is basically laying of the infrastructure and keeping some amount of land for the future development or the recovery of the infrastructure cost or for the commercial exploitation, that part is owned by the government. So, that is why it is the partly ownership transfer, and here the approach is very much participatory. And bottom up, because without the participation of the original landowner this particular method is not possible. So, here government's role is to talk with the people, negotiate with the people, come to a specific proposal, place them the proposal, get their feedback, get their grievances, then coming back to the studio, to the work, incorporating all the changes and feedback given by the people, then again go back to the people and presenting them and finalize the plan. So, here the whole process is participation. Sometimes it is called town planning scheme, sometimes it is called land readjustment scheme, it is written in the slides also, or it is called plot reconstitution, land pooling, readjustment. Mostly in the states like Gujarat, Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, this kind of states they have readily their town and country planning acts have this kind of provision of the land plot reconstitution, whereas right now all the few other state government they are also trying to incorporate this element of the land assembly for the future development of the housing, because this particular method has the advantage of not going into land acquisition method, which is very time a lengthy process and sometimes stringent process, but it has a participatory and bottom up process, but it also ensures the planned and urban development. Then we come to the partnership model. In the partnership model we told that the land is retained by the owner or it is based on the partnership, how the land is owned, it can be shared also. So, here assigning land use, it is partly, because Here the land use prescription depends on the government's overall policy use of that particular land, and it depends on the effective negotiation of the government and the private party, but definitely it will not violate the overall master plan or LUDCP. So, within the overall master plan and LUDCP prescription, with a particular land parcel, government can take a very specific regulations or control in discussion with the private party. Similarly, here also mostly no or partly, and here the approach is through negotiation. If any land is to be purchased by the private party or private company, they can purchase the land directly from the market and they can work with the government to develop a overall this thing. Now, the positive part of this particular approach is the land acquisition. It ensures that the large amount of land is possible. So, its advantage is this one, this is the advantage where they can ensure a exclusive right of government land or bigger land government plan, but its limitation is that it is a very lengthy, it is the approach is kind of top down and it is time consuming. So, that is the most difficult part of the Land Acquisition Act, whereas the master plan and LUDCP, its advantage is they have a very stringent mechanism of control of the land, but definitely they do not ensure the land transfer from private to governments. So, if you want to get large amount of land for the public purpose, for the future development of industry and infrastructure, land acquisition method is the only method. You cannot go for master plan and LUDCP method, but this is required for the overall control of the city, overall control of the land for the future housing and urbanization. So, that is the major difference. Whereas land assembly basically maintains a balance between these two approach. It ensures some amount of land by the government, they can use some 30-40% of the land for their own purpose, for infrastructure and the commercial purpose, and also at the same time it is a they have a control over the land and the build form. At the same time the approach is participatory, and in this approach it is not much very stringent approach, though it is time lengthy, it is also time consuming. Very much time consuming process, but at the same time, since it is a participatory bottom up approach, it ensures effective land distribution over the government and private. That is why this plot reconstitution approach, which is termed as town planning scheme or land readjustment, it is very much famous and popular in some of the states. The partnership model depends on the particular context. For example, say the airport of New Delhi, this it is developed by a partnership model by government of Delhi, government of India and another private developer. So, here the most important part is here it is based on the negotiation. You do not have to bother about the acquisition or control or anything. Based on the negotiation, if it depends on the negotiation and the quality of the negotiation and the context for the success of the project. So, this 4 approaches is available for land assembly. Now, based on the 4 approach, we can use any of the approach based on our convenience or the context. Now, what we can say that as a further study, you can see the latest Land Acquisition Act 2014 or with its amendment. At least one of the land use and development control plan, maybe master plan or maybe LUDCP for any city, and one you see the Town and Country Planning Act or any example of land readjustment or town planning scheme. There are many example in Gujarat or the Madhya Pradesh. You can see any one of the example, and there are many partnership model. Right now it is being adopted, especially with the smart city project. Various cities they are adopting the partnership model of land assembly for the future development of the housing. So, based on this, today we discuss the the dynamics of land value, accessibility and city form, the essence of the unplanned and the planned housing, and also we discuss the 4 approach in the land assembly, where starting from a very kind of a difficult or the very time consuming method to a more partnership method to more participatory method, the 4 approach we have and we can use as per our requirement. So, in the next class, next lecture, we will discuss the another important part of the concern for the housing delivery, which is affordability for the housing. We discussed so far the policy, the planning intervention, legal and institutional framework. Also, we have discussed land for the housing. So, next part of the discussion will be affordability and financial part of the housing, which is very crucial in particularly for the country like India. So, thank you. See you in the next class.